determine which URL to crawl next. So which page do you harvest URLs from next? Okay, so that and so given certain focus topics on which you are supposed to do the crawling, you could start from the same seed, but then do retrieve a very different set of documents depending on what you are looking to crawl. Okay, so that's something, and it was very computationally intensive and not very successful. So you can see that there's not much follow up on that work. Of course, focus crawling itself, I mean, too many people do work in that area, but using reinforcement learning, there's not much work after early 2000. Right, but these are areas where people have used it, and there's also lots of attempts at using reinforcement learning for natural language processing. Right, nothing that's so successful that stands out that I feel the need to bring up here. But if you Google, you would get some kinds of hits on that. But nothing really great. But these are things which actually work well, especially the dialogue system things and these, right? So that in computational advertising and also in this kind of personalization work, reinforcement learning is one of the first solutions that people consider nowadays. They have been significantly successful. Great. So any questions? Yeah. Sure.
Have you seen any application in finance, algorithmic trading and so?
Well, there is this group in Oregon, Graduate Institute. There's this guy called Moody. Okay, what is his first name? Moody. So his group has actually done a lot of work on using reinforcement learning for computational finance prediction. So he heads the department of computational finance. So apart from that, right, in this algorithmic trading community and so on and so forth, I know that people in Goldman Sachs are looking at reinforcement learning, but of course they are not going to publish any of these things, right? Because a couple of my students work there. So they tell me, sir, finally we found a use for reinforcement learning. We're actually using it in our work, right? But yeah, so what they exactly do with RL, I'm not sure. But yeah, you can potentially see applications of this. But yeah, if you're interested, Moody has lots of work on it. Holding the mic steady with one hand is like punishment. Good. Okay, moving on. I think that's part 2, right? Okay. So I originally gave part 2 as a seminar in IIT Kanpur. I was giving something in a workshop, right? And it took me like 2 hours. So I don't think we were able to get through all of part 2 today, but we'll see. Yeah.
This reinforcement learning, has it been used in machine translation?
We used machine translation.
Language translation.
You could potentially use it there. So one place where people have used reinforcement learning in conjunction with large language classification problems. The question was, has reinforcement learning been used in machine translation? Right? Or are you making a statement that it has been?
That's my question.
Oh, that's a question. Fine. It very well be that it has been and I'm not aware of it. That's what I was asking. Because the literature is pretty vast, you know, it's like there's too many things out there. So one thing where people have used this is active learning. Okay? So in active learning, the goal is to minimize the labeling load on a human. So you typically want training data that is labeled. So how you go about doing it is arbitrarily choose some subset of the data that you have and give it to some human experts and get them to label it. Right? It's quite likely that some of the labeling that they are doing is redundant. Right? So they might be labeling the same thing over and over again. So what you do is you start with a small seed set of documents, okay, and then as the learning progresses, okay, you say that, oh, I'm really not sure about what this document should be. Can you get a human to label this one? Okay, so that's called active learning. The learning agent actively asks for label from the humans. Yeah. So,
how is it different from bootstrap?
What do you mean by bootstrap?
Bootstrapping is that like you start with the model and then like you find out the unknowns that give you a really high confidence value and then start including them into your training set as if they are
well, I'm not familiar with that particular usage of bootstrapping, because bootstrapping typically is like you know, bootstrap sampling kind of thing, so where you have a small enough sample set, and then you try to sample with replacement from a set and try to do some parameter estimation based on bootstrap sampling. So, but active learning, there is a human in the loop. I'm not sure whether bootstrapping, as you mentioned, it has a human in the loop or not. Yeah, usually it's automated, right? So active learning has a human in the loop. It is specifically query for labels. Like that, okay, here is an example which I'm not sure how to label. Can you get an expert to label it? So that's a difference here. So there are multiple ways in people do it. One is to say that, okay, here is a large pool of unlabeled examples. Tell me which of these examples you want labeled. Or you can create examples synthetically, saying that, oh, here is an example. So suppose, for example, think of some kind of a linear classifier that you're using. So you have data points. I learned some kind of a hyperplane. Then I can pick data point that lies on the hyperplane. Okay, that lies on this surface that separates the positive and negative class. I can pick a data point on that surface and give it to a human. And say, can you label this? So if the human says this is positive, then I'll move it one way. If the human says it's negative, I'll move it the other way. Right? So that way I can create synthetically, can create examples and ask them to label and so on. But how many such labels do you ask? So the whole idea was for minimizing the labeling overhead. So what people have done is actually cast this as a reinforcement learning problem. So which data points do you pick to label? And what is the reward that you are going to get? The reward that you get will be how much does your classifier's performance improve by asking this label. But every label that you ask also has a cost.
Yeah, but in active learning, we were just our task was to reduce the effort level, not the error or
Well, then just don't ask for any labels, right? That will reduce the error completely. I mean, that will reduce the effort to zero. So you need some acceptable performance from the classifier, right? So the fewer examples you can ask the humans to label and get to that acceptable performance, the better it is.
we are optimizing both.
I mean, that's the whole idea of learning is to minimize the error, right? But can you do it with fewer examples? Right? So people cast this as a reinforcement learning problem, especially in the context of language, because where the data is available very large, but labeling effort, of course, I can pull off 1 billion documents with some amount of effort from the web, right? But asking humans to sit and label 1 billion documents is just not.
One more question. So in this reinforcement learning, we are getting feedback at every point continuously.
Not necessarily.
Okay, so discrete points, for example. So if our process is such that we get feedback only at the end of process,
Yeah.
then would it be similar to supervised learning?
In supervised learning, I will tell you what to do. When I give an input during the training phase, when I give an input, I'll tell you what the output is. So if you think of the game playing example, the backgammon example I was telling you about, the reward was coming at the end of the game. I just tell you +1 or -1. That doesn't tell you anything about how the game should have been played. And if I tell you how the game should have been played, then it's supervised learning. If I only give you the same +1, -1, instead of giving it all along the way, if you get it, it doesn't matter. Does it make sense? Because what I'm giving you is like an evaluative feedback. So in supervised learning, you get instructions. So think of this. It's like me teaching you a class. Then you give me some answers, and I keep telling you right or wrong. I never teach a class. I never tell you what the right answer is, and then I give you an exam where I test you about the answers. Right? So you just give me an answer sheet, and I'll tell you 5. Okay? I'll not tell you which answer is right, which answer is wrong, and how you should correct your answers and so on. So I'll just tell you 5. And I'm giving you the feedback at the end of the day. Still, you can't use supervised learning. Other questions? It's where reinforcement and supervised learning become very close. Okay? That is when the output itself is 0 or 1. So when I have binary outputs, and then I tell you, I give you an output of 1 and you give me a reward of 0. Then I give you output of 0, you give me a reward of 1. That basically tells me that 0 is the correct output. So whatever, if my reward is 1, then I can take the output I gave as the correct output.
Yeah, actually I had that problem in mind, so that's why I was confused.
Okay. So if it's binary, signals, and you can think of this as being supervised learning. But if it is stochastic, okay, there is still room for improving upon the supervised learning performance using reinforcement learning. So there are very simple examples. I can point you to a small study which was done, which took this binary case and then showed that some binary problems, depending on the amount of noise, some binary problems are easy for supervised learners to solve, while some binary problems are hard for supervised learners but easier for reinforcement learning.
Okay, and what about the binary problems like we use logistic regression or SE? So can we use reinforced learning for that? Can we transform the problems into reinforced learning?
You could. It's just that you might end up spending more effort solving it as a reinforcement learning problem than as a LR problem. So if you have high quality labels on your data, right, then I would always recommend trying a supervised learning approach first. Right? The quality of labeling is poor. Okay? Then maybe you want to do a little bit more exploration kind of things. But if you have high quality labels on the data, then trying to solve it using the traditional zero loss minimization or some surrogate loss minimization, traditional supervised learning approach is probably better. Okay, so what to part 2? Right, good. Right, so we are going to take one key question that in the reinforcement learning setting, which is the exploration and exploitation dilemma. Right? So what do we mean by this? So if you remember the task, so I go right and I go left, I get a reward of 2. Great. So I know one way of solving the problem. I can exploit that. So every time I run the maze, I can go right, left, and I keep getting reward of 2 all the time. Right? But we know, because we have seen the whole maze, we know that going left and right is better than going right and left. Right? So how will you find that out? Right? You have to explore even after you have found some kind of a solution to the problem. Right? So you have to keep exploring until you get to what is the best solution. But how do you know you have reached the best solution? You don't. Right? Because nobody is sitting there and telling you that, oh, there is no other secret passageway that you can figure out. Then how many of you play this first-person shooter games? Right? So you keep bumping into walls all the time, right? So figuring out if there is a secret entrance that opens somewhere. So that's exploration. It's not enough to walk through the maze, kill all the demons you see the first time and jump to the next level. You have to keep bumping into all these walls to figure out whether there is an opening somewhere that you can take. Right? So this is exploration versus exploitation. Right? So exploit according to what you have already found out. Right? Exploit according to what's the best observations already made. Right? It could very well be at some point that is all that you can do. Right? You can't do better than that, but you have to figure that out. So when do you stop exploring and start exploiting? So that's the key question in reinforcement learning. In all forms of reinforcement learning. So we look at this notion of a bandit problem, which essentially encapsulates this explore exploit issue. It focuses on the explore exploit issue, doesn't worry about the other complicating factors of reinforcement learning, namely the sequential nature of the problem. So I don't make a sequence of decisions. The bandit problem, I always make one decision, okay? But then the outcomes can be stochastic. So therefore, I have to explore all possible decisions that I can make before I freeze on something and then I take that outcome. So this is the explore exploit dilemma distilled to a single decision making. Okay, that's basically what the bandit problems are. So formally, I would say that an n-arm bandit problem is to learn to preferentially select a particular arm or action, okay, from a set of n actions. We label them 1 to n for convenience, okay, and each selection results in a reward that is derived from some unknown but stationary probability distribution. For the time being, we'll assume it's stationary. There are ways of handling non-stationarity, but I will not talk about that. Right? And so we also assume that arm I has a reward distribution with mean mu I. And they denote by mu star the best arm. Okay? So these are called bandit, multi-arm bandit problems because of slot machines. So people are know what slot machines are. So you put a coin there, you pull the lever, and the machine eats your coin. Okay? So mostly, okay. Occasionally you pull the lever and you get coins out, and usually happens to the guy next to you. And so these machines are called one-arm bandits. They steal your coin away. Right? So, but in reality, there is some probability with which you will get a reward when you pull the arm. Okay? So in multi-arm bandit problems, you have n such slot machines or one slot machine with n such arms. Okay, and each one of them has a different probability of giving you rewards. So you don't know which one is likely to give you a higher reward in the long run. So you have to keep pulling them, all of them at least once. You have to pull all of them at least once, and possibly multiple times, before you can figure out which is the best arm to pull, and then keep pulling it again and again. Seems to be a very simple enough problem, but people have looked at it over the years, and like I said, it goes back to the 30s, and people have tried to come up with different kinds of solutions for it. And so the applications are numerous. So here is a Yahoo News website, right? So what happens is they have a bunch of stories. There's some Yahoo News editors sit down and pull out like 20 stories or something like that from whatever is currently hot. And then a learning algorithm tries to figure out which of those 20 stories does it give this kind of a top billing. So it shows up the big pictures and small pictures and so on and so forth. Right? So you can think of this as a bandit problem. So what are the actions that you can take? What are the arms here? The arms are the different news stories. The 20 stories that the generator has picked. So 20 arms. And so you pull an arm. Basically, what is the equivalent of pulling an arm here? You display the news story. And what is your reward?
It's split.
Yeah. If user clicks on it, then you count that as a reward. Okay? And we already saw that click-through rates are very, very small on most of these things, and therefore the rewards are very sparse. And then you have to come up with clever ways of learning, which is the best action to take. Okay? And the time pressure on you to learn is incredible, because within an hour or so, what news stories are hot will change. Right? So it's not like you have a fixed set of actions throughout. Right? So within like every hour you have to be solving a different problem. So you can't take forever to learn about which is the best action. You have to learn it very quickly. So how do you do that? That's the problem that people ask here. Okay? Or it could be ad selection. This is a particularly bad example because I was giving it a very good search query. But then, but I don't really need to show you examples of this. Right? All of you see this almost every day, multiple times. In fact, you see it so often, you probably learned to ignore it. Right? You don't see it anymore. Right? And anyway, so how do you select these ads? Right? So what happens is there's a small component of learning here, right? So because there are lots of other economic factors that go into figuring out what are the acceptable pool of ads from which you are going to display a few of them. Okay, right? And then once you know the acceptable pool of ads, then you can use a reinforcement learning like algorithm or bandit like algorithm, right? The actions are the ads and the rewards are click-through. A lot more complicating factors here because you're choosing a set of ads together, right? So that affects the click-through rates, and where you put the ad affects the click-through rates and so on and so forth. Lots of complicating factors here, but the basic core of it is some kind of a bandit. Right? And you could think of recommendation systems, right? So this is from Amazon, I suppose, or IMDb. IMDb, yeah, great. So, right, so people who like this also like. So you could think of this as bandit. You can model this as a bandit problem, but really, I mean, people who like this also like, because you have all this rating information, star information, and all that. So you can just go with the star information and say that people who rated this as 5 star and rated something else as 5 star. So we'll just show that movies here. But then, really, there's a huge pool, you know. I mean, you could think of customers who bought this, also bought, and customers who bought items in your recent history also bought. So there are different mechanisms by which you can pull up candidates, right? So different mechanisms by which you can pull up candidates for recommending. How do you choose among these various candidates? Again, people set this up as a reinforcement learning problem. So that's very set of nice tutorials on recommender systems online. So you can look it up, and a couple of them talk about how to cast this as bandit problems. I have links to it at the end of the presentation. So, and it's not. I mean, again, I'm kind of hiding a lot of complexity. Solving this will take more work than just setting it up as a simple bandit problem, but that's what they're right? And then this is something which we talked about earlier, comment recommendation. You get a bunch of thumbs up, thumbs down. But then if you just go by thumbs up and thumbs down, your feedback will be very sparse. And there will also be the first mover bias in this whole thing. So just that is not enough, right? So you have to basically do some kind of an explore exploit pushing here. So exploit would be, okay, I know that these comments are good, I keep showing them again and again and again, in which case that's going to be a bad thing, because you really need to explore so that you can bring in newer comments and newer viewpoints into the responses. So this is pulled out of Yahoo News again. Okay, so the applications of bandit problems, apart from whatever I showed you, ads, recommender system, a lot of other things. People have even talked about the multi-class prediction problems where the labeling is very, very noisy, right? So people have tried to get feedback using this kind of a bandit approach to classification. So try to generate additional feedback from users, right? And variety of things. So we used it in networks, in optical networks. People have used it for wavelength selection. People have used it for parameter selection. Quite often, there are actual, practical implementations where people needed to use rate control, and where they didn't have a good model of the system. The system was too complex to model, that people have actually used bandit problems in production systems. That people use bandit algorithms. It's a wide application. And yeah, just to remind you of what the problem is. Very simple setup, right? So, what is your objective? Right? So classically, people who are solving bandit problems were only interested in identifying the correct arm eventually. So asymptotically, right? I want to be able to identify the correct arm. So I don't care about how many trials I am taking, but I want to give you the guarantee that eventually I will be pulling the arm that gives me the highest expected reward. So that is asymptotic guarantees. So traditionally, that's the kind of analysis that's been done on these algorithms. And there are many algorithms, even very simple-minded algorithms, which do this. And then, so the optimizing there would be how to change the rate of convergence. So how quickly do you approach optimality? Even though you are approaching the only guarantee I give you is as t tends to infinity, you will be playing the optimal arm. Okay? But then, what is the slope of your learning, right? So that is basically what you're controlling there. Right? But then I'm not interested in just that alone, but I'm also interested in how am I performing during the learning process. So not only at the end of the learning process, during the learning process, how am I performing? I shouldn't be making too many mistakes along the way, right? So if you think about like the online ad selection case, right? If I just say, oh, eventually you give me the right ad, right? Along the way, I don't care how crappy ads you show me. You know, that's not going to work. Right? People are, if you show a few 100,000 people, if you show them crappy ads, people will stop coming to your page. Right? So you cannot be making significant errors along the way. So you have to be very careful about how much you are losing along the way in performance, right? So the loss that you get when compared to what you could have obtained if you had been behaving optimally throughout, right? So that loss is known as regret. Okay? So algorithms have tried to minimize regret while solving the bandit problems or the current range. Okay? So people look at that a lot. And the third solution concept that people are focusing on with bandit problems is something that's called probably approximately correct. How many of you have come across PAC before? One. Okay. So it kind of seems to be overly specific, right? Probably approximately correct. But they are talking about two different things. Okay? So the approximately correct part is the easier one for people to understand. So when I finally tell you, okay, this is the best arm, okay, in reality, it need not be the best arm, but it will be very close to the best arm. So basically I'm saying approximately I'll give you the optimal arm. Okay? Where the factor of approximation is very small. So if the optimal arm will give me say 10 units of reward, whatever arm I give you say will be within 9.93. So my epsilon there is 0.07. So I basically give you those kinds of guarantees. So I want to return epsilon optimal arms. Okay? And then, but I'm going to do this after drawing some number of samples, right? I'm not going to worry about going till infinity. So if I go till infinity, obviously I can always give you the best arm. Okay? But suppose after some number of trials, I'm going to say I have pulled it enough. Here is the arm. Okay. Now this arm should be within epsilon. But given that we are dealing with stochastic systems, to say that with probability 1, I'm sure that when I stop and give you the arm, it will be within epsilon of the real optimum, right? I cannot give that guarantee. If I'm going to stop with a small number of samples, because the underlying system itself is stochastic, right? It could very well be that on that one particular day, right, I got a really bad set of samples, okay, and I messed up very badly. Right? So there is a small chance that I will mess up. How small a chance? Okay, there's a chance of delta that I will mess up. So basically the pack analysis tells you that, okay, if you will give me so many samples from these arms, okay, I'll sample in some way, I'll choose the way I sample these arms, but this is the number of samples that I need to draw, this is the number of times I have to pull, or this is the number of ads I have to show. Okay. If you allow me so many samples, then I'll guarantee that with a very high probability, I will be very close to the optimum. Okay, so this is basically what pack guarantees mean. Okay. I'll be approximately correct with a high probability. So that's what we mean by probably approximately correct. So it turns out that this kind of pack analysis can be performed not just on bandit algorithms, but even in regular classification algorithms and so on and so forth. Right? So in this case, my epsilon optimality means that the reward I get will be within epsilon. In the classification, epsilon optimality would mean the classifier I will give you, the error that classifier makes will be no more than epsilon of the best possible error. Okay. So that's basically, so you can do this kind of pack analysis for other kinds of problems also, not just for the bandit problems. So the goal here is to see if you can give the same epsilon delta guarantee, okay, with fewer and fewer samples. You have to minimize the sample complexity. If I give you a lot of samples, of course, even stupid algorithms will give me epsilon delta guarantees. The goal here is to minimize the number of samples. Okay? So the very simple traditional approach is essentially to pull each arm, okay, some number of times. You pull each arm, let's say start off by pulling each arm once. Then you find out what is the reward that you are getting. Okay. Now, you pull the arm which is going to give you the maximum reward based on all the rewards that you have seen so far. Okay. The pull the arm which you think will give you the maximum reward based on all the rewards you have seen so far. So how do you do that? So you just basically maintain an average of all the rewards you have seen when you pull an arm. Right? So my mu hat I essentially is the average of the rewards I get whenever I pull arm I. Okay. So whenever I show news story 1, okay, how many times have people clicked through it? So I'll maintain an average. Okay, I've shown news story 1,000 times, 5 people have clicked through it. So my mu hat 1 is 5 by 1,000. So I'll maintain this kind of average for all my arms. Okay. So what I do is at any time step, I select the arm that has the highest expectation according to the estimates that I have made so far. Okay. But if I do that greedily all the time, okay, then obviously I'm not going to learn, right? So the first time I get a click on some news story, I'll just keep showing that news story again and again and again. I'm not going to change because I got one click and I'm not showing the other news stories. Okay. So there is no way they are going to get clicks. Okay. So I'll just be showing this one story again and again and again. So what we do to ensure that doesn't happen is that I select the greedy arm, the best possible arm with some probability 1 minus epsilon. This is a different epsilon, not the same one that we had in the last slide. Okay, this is the parameter of the algorithm. So I'll pick this with probability 1 minus epsilon, and with probability epsilon I'll pick some arbitrary action. Just take a random story and show. Now if that story, when I show it, happens to get a click, great. Right? So what we can show is very trivially, right? As t tends to infinity, every arm will be selected infinitely often. Right? Even if I'm selecting with the probability epsilon, if I'm allowed to make infinite number of choices, I'll pick every arm infinitely often. Right? So if I pick infinitely often and I take the average of the rewards I'm getting, those averages will converge to the expectations. Right? So in reality, I'll actually converge to the true values. Right? So it's very simple. Asymptotically I'll converge, but this is not good in terms of a convergence result. And you certainly don't want to do this for ad selection kind of thing. I mean, I'm talking about arbitrarily showing an ad. You know, like yeah. So we had all this bad story effect he's talking about, and we don't want those horror stories to happen. Right? You don't want to arbitrarily show an ad that's completely inappropriate and so on. So you need to have other ways of controlling this. But it's a very simple algorithm, and in fact, in many cases, when we are trying to develop new bandit algorithms, we find empirically epsilon greedy very hard to beat. You can get small improvements over epsilon greedy, but not great improvements. So still, there might be that one rainy day when it really goes wrong. So people are wary about using it. Okay. And I'm going to skip this. But if people are interested, there's a whole body of literature called Learning Automata. There's a fantastic introduction by Narendra and Tata Shah. It's a book that's about A-bait. And just about one particular approach to solving the bandit problem. It's a fantastic analysis. Right? And there are lots of results. So as far as regret analysis is concerned,